The signal had been broadcasting for 4,127 years. Every single day, without pause, without rest, the great towers of Sanctuary Prime sent their desperate cry into the endless black of space. Generations of the Velori people had lived their entire lives maintaining those towers. They were born hearing the hum of the machines. They died still waiting for an answer that never came. Elder Rin stood at the window of the High Council chamber and watched the twin suns set over his dying world. He was old now, even by Velori standards. His pale blue skin had turned gray with age. His 4 eyes, once bright and full of hope, now carried only exhaustion. Behind him, the other council members whispered among themselves. They all knew why he had called this meeting. They all feared what he was about to say. "We must accept the truth," Rin said without turning around. His voice was soft, but it filled the room. "The galaxy is empty, or perhaps worse. Perhaps the galaxy heard us and chose to ignore our cries." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. No one wanted to speak. No one wanted to agree with what they all knew to be true. The Pale Swarm had been hunting the Velori for thousands of years. No one remembered how the war started anymore. It did not matter. The Swarm did not negotiate. They did not make peace. They only consumed. Planet after planet had fallen. Colony after colony had gone dark. Now only Sanctuary Prime remained, protected by the last of the Velori fleet, which grew smaller with each passing year. "You want to turn off the towers," said Council Member Aura. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You want to give up." Rin finally turned to face them. "I want to stop lying to our children. We tell them that help is coming. We tell them to have faith. But faith without reason is cruelty. We are teaching them to hope for something that will never arrive." The council members looked at each other. Some nodded slowly. Others wiped tears from their eyes. They had all lost family to the swarm. They had all buried friends. The thought of surrendering to despair was terrible, but the thought of continuing this endless, hopeless wait was somehow worse. Rin opened his mouth to call for a vote, but before he could speak, the doors of the chamber burst open with a crash. Keeper Oles ran into the room. He was young, barely an adult by Velori standards. His job was to maintain the ancient archives and listen to the silence that came back from the broadcast towers. It was considered a ceremonial position. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever would happen. But now Oles was shaking. His hands trembled so badly that he nearly dropped the data tablet he carried. His eyes were wide with something that looked like fear, or perhaps it was wonder. Rin could not tell the difference. Elder Oles gasped. He could barely breathe. Something answered. The room went completely still. For a moment no one moved, no one even breathed. Rin felt his old heart skip a beat. "That is not possible," he said slowly. "In 4,000 years nothing has ever—" "I know," Oles interrupted. He did not seem to realize he had just interrupted the most powerful person on the planet. "I know it is not possible, but it happened. Look." He thrust the data tablet toward the elder. Rin took it with hands that had begun to shake. He looked at the screen. The message was simple. It used basic communication codes that were so old, so primitive, that they had nearly been forgotten. Radio waves, simple electromagnetic pulses. The kind of technology the Velori had stopped using thousands of years ago. But the message was clear. "We received your call. Hold your position. Terran response fleet en route. ETA 3 cycles." Rin read the message 3 times. He did not understand. "Terran," he said slowly. "I do not know this word. What is a Terran? Who are these people?" Oles swallowed hard. "I searched the archives, Elder. There is only one match. A small planet in an unremarkable system near the edge of the galaxy. It was surveyed 4,000 years ago, around the same time we began our broadcast." "And what did the survey say?" Oles looked uncomfortable. The planet was labeled as primitive, Elder. The species living there had not yet achieved space flight. They were still fighting among themselves with basic weapons: fire, metal, explosive powder. The survey team decided they were no threat and no use to anyone. They placed a quarantine beacon around the system and marked the file as closed. Rin stared at the young keeper. You are telling me that a primitive species, one that could barely leave their own world 4,000 years ago, is now sending us a message saying they have a fleet coming to help us? Yes, Elder. That is impossible. No species advances that quickly. It would take tens of thousands of years to go from basic combustion to interstellar travel. The physics simply do not allow it. Oles had no answer. He simply stood there, holding the data tablet, waiting. Council member Aura stepped forward. Could it be a trick? The swarm is cunning. Perhaps they are trying to give us false hope before the final attack. The swarm does not communicate, another council member said. They have never sent a message in all the years we have fought them. They do not negotiate. They do not deceive. They simply destroy. Rin looked at the message again. 3 cycles. That was less than a week in their time measurement. If this was real, if someone was truly coming, they would know very soon. What do we do, Elder? Oles asked. Rin was silent for a long moment. He thought about the towers. He thought about 4,000 years of unanswered cries. He thought about all the Velori who had died waiting for this moment. We wait, he said finally. We have been waiting for 4,000 years. We can wait 3 more cycles. He handed the tablet back to Oles. Tell no one about this. Not yet. If this is real, our people will know soon enough. If it is false, there is no need to give them hope only to take it away again. Oles nodded and left the chamber. The council members began to whisper among themselves again, but Rin did not listen. He walked back to the window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness of space, something had heard them. Something was coming. He did not know if he should feel hope or fear. Perhaps, he thought, there was no difference anymore. The Velori had called out into the void for 4,000 years, begging for anyone to listen. Now, finally, something had answered. Rin just hoped they would survive long enough to meet whoever was coming. And he hoped, more than anything, that whatever the Terrans were, they were strong enough to stand against the swarm. Because if they were not, then this message was not a rescue. It was simply one more species coming to die. Scout Ven had spent his entire life watching the stars. It was his duty. Every day he climbed to the observation deck high above Sanctuary Prime and looked out into space, searching for signs of the pale swarm. He had done this job for 15 years. He knew every star, every distant planet, every piece of space rock that drifted through their system. He thought he had seen everything the universe had to show him. He was wrong. On the 3rd day after the strange message arrived, the sky split open. Ven was drinking his morning tea when it happened. One moment, space was empty and black and silent, just as it had always been. The next moment, a line of pure white light cut across the darkness like a knife. The line grew wider. It became a circle. Then the circle became a hole, and through that hole came something that made Ven drop his cup and forget how to breathe. Ships, more ships than he had ever seen in his life. More ships than the entire Velori fleet combined. They poured through the rift in space like water through a broken dam, one after another after another. Ven tried to count them but gave up after 100. There were simply too many. And the flagship, the ship that led them all, it was so large that it blocked out the stars behind it. Ven had seen Velori battle cruisers. He had seen the massive hive ships of the Pale Swarm. But this thing made them all look like toys. It was a mountain of metal and fire, covered in weapons that Ven could not even recognize. His communication device screamed with incoming signals. The entire planet was waking up. People were running into the streets, looking up at the sky, pointing and shouting. Some were crying. Some were praying. Nobody knew if they should be celebrating or running for their lives. Then a face appeared on every screen on the planet. It was a strange face. Ven had never seen anything like it. The creature had only two eyes set flat in its skull. Its skin was a light brown color. Its hair was black and cut short. It wore a uniform of dark gray, decorated with small symbols that meant nothing to Ven. The creature spoke. Its voice was calm, almost bored, like it had done this many times before. "This is Captain Yun Ti of the Terran Response Fleet 7. We received your distress signal. We apologize for the delay in responding. We have been busy with other matters." Busy? 4,000 years of silence, and this creature said they had been busy. Ven did not know whether to laugh or scream. In the High Council chamber, Elder Rin was already at the communication panel. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely operate the controls. When he finally managed to send a response, his voice cracked with emotion. "Terran vessel, this is Elder Rin of the Velori people. We cannot express our gratitude. We have been calling for help for 4,000 years. We had lost all hope. We thought we were alone." There was a pause. Then Captain Yun Ti nodded slowly. "You were never alone, Elder. We just needed time to prepare." Elder Rin quickly explained the situation. The Pale Swarm, their endless hunger, their complete refusal to negotiate. He described how the swarm had destroyed hundreds of Velori worlds. He warned the Terrans that the enemy was numerous and relentless. He told them that fighting the swarm meant fighting an ocean with a small cup. Captain Yun Ti listened without interrupting. His face showed no emotion. When Rin finished speaking, the human captain was silent for a long moment. Then another face appeared on the screen. A female Terran, younger than the captain, with sharp eyes and a cold expression. "Elder Rin," she said, "this is Lieutenant Hana Kim, tactical officer. I have reviewed the information you sent. I have also reviewed your ancient archives." Rin felt a chill run through his old bones. "Our archives?" "Yes, we downloaded them from your public networks when we entered the system. I found something interesting. 4,000 years ago, your survey team visited our planet. They studied us. They marked us as primitive and harmless. They placed a quarantine beacon around our system and then forgot we existed." Rin did not know what to say. He had not even known about the ancient survey until Keeper Oles told him. "I apologize if our ancestors caused any offense. They could not have known." "I am not offended, Elder." Lieutenant Kim's voice was flat. "I am simply making an observation. Your people looked at us and saw primitive creatures playing with fire and sharp sticks. You decided we were no threat. You labeled us and forgot about us." She paused. Her eyes seemed to look directly into Rin's soul. "You were wrong about us, Elder. I suspect you may also be wrong about the swarm." Captain Yun Ti spoke again. "Elder, I am sending a shuttle to your surface. I would like to meet with you and your council in person. We have much to discuss." Rin agreed immediately. Within an hour, a small Terran vessel landed in the central plaza of the capital city. Thousands of Velori gathered to watch. They had never seen an alien species before. For 4,000 years, they had been alone except for the endless attacks of the swarm. The shuttle door opened. 4 Terrans stepped out. Ven had left his observation post to join the crowd. He wanted to see these strange beings up close. What he saw terrified him. The Terrans walked differently than any species Ven had ever seen. Their movements were smooth but heavy. Each step seemed to shake the ground slightly. When they breathed, their chests expanded in a way that suggested huge, powerful lungs. Their eyes moved constantly, scanning the crowd, checking every shadow, every corner. They walked like predators. One of them was massive. He was at least twice the size of any Velori. His arms were thick with muscle. His face was covered in scars. He wore heavy armor and carried weapons that looked like they could destroy buildings. This, Ven later learned, was Sergeant Park Ho. Beside him walked a smaller Terran with gentle eyes and a soft smile. This was Dr. Li Su, the chief scientist. She looked almost harmless compared to the sergeant, But Ven noticed that even she moved with that same predator grace. Even she had eyes that never stopped watching. Captain Yun-Ti approached Elder Rin and extended his hand. It was a strange gesture, but Rin understood it somehow. He reached out and took the human's hand. The captain's grip was gentle, but Rin could feel the strength hidden beneath that gentleness. It was like shaking hands with a creature made of stone. "Thank you for coming," Rin said. "We do not know how to repay you." "There is no debt," Captain Yun-Ti replied. "We heard a call for help, we answered. That is what we do." As they walked toward the council chamber, Ven overheard Dr. Li Su speaking quietly to one of the Velori guides. "Your atmosphere is thin," she said. "Your gravity is light, it feels like floating to us. On our world the air is thick and heavy. The gravity pulls at our bones constantly. Everything on our planet is trying to kill us. Diseases, weather, animals, even the plants, we evolved surrounded by death." The guide looked confused. "That sounds terrible. How did your species survive?" Dr. Li Su smiled. It was a kind smile, but something about it made Ven's blood run cold. "We became very good at killing back," she said. Ven watched the Terrans disappear into the council building. He looked up at the massive fleet that still filled the sky. 200 warships, thousands of soldiers, technology that made Velori science look like children's toys. 4,000 years ago, the Velori had dismissed these creatures as primitive. Ven was beginning to understand just how wrong they had been. The Pale Swarm arrived on the 5th day. They came without warning, as they always did. 800 vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel and filled the space around Sanctuary Prime like a swarm of hungry insects. The hive ships were enormous, covered in strange organic growths that pulsed with sickly light. Smaller attack craft poured from their bellies by the thousands. The Velori had seen this before. This was how every battle with the swarm began. This was usually how those battles ended too, with fire and death and the screaming of the dying. But this time was different. Scout Ven had been assigned to an observation bunker on one of the outer moons. It was supposed to be safe there, far from the fighting. His job was to watch and record everything that happened. The Velori wanted a complete record of this battle, no matter how it ended. So Ven watched, and what he saw changed everything he thought he knew about war. The Terran fleet moved first. They did not wait for the swarm to attack. They did not form defensive lines or try to protect the planet. Instead, they charged directly at the enemy. Ven expected this to be suicide. The swarm outnumbered the Terrans 4-1. The Velori had tried aggressive tactics before. It had never worked. The swarm simply absorbed the attack and kept coming. But the Terrans were not like the Velori. The human fighters were small and fast. They moved through space in patterns that should have been impossible. They spun and twisted and changed direction so quickly that the swarm weapons could not track them. When a swarm ship tried to target a Terran fighter, the fighter was already gone, already behind the enemy, already firing. Ven saw swarm cruisers explode one after another. Their shields, which had withstood years of Velori weapons, shattered like glass under the Terran assault. The human weapons burned with strange blue fire that seemed to eat through metal like acid. In less than 1 hour, the Terrans had destroyed over 200 swarm vessels. But then something went wrong. One of the swarm hive ships managed to break through the Terran line. It was heading straight for the outer colonies, where thousands of Velori civilians lived. The Terran fleet was too far away to stop it in time. Ven felt his heart sink. He had seen this before too, the swarm breaking through, the helpless civilians dying, the screams that lasted for hours. Then a single Terran ship appeared in front of the hive vessel. It was small, barely larger than the shuttle that had brought Captain Yun-Ti to the planet. It should have been crushed instantly. Instead, it flew directly into the docking bay of the hive ship. Ven switched his observation equipment to track what was happening inside. He had never been able to see inside a swarm vessel before. The Terrans had given him special sensors that could penetrate the organic walls. What he saw made him sick, and then it made him terrified. Sergeant Park Ho stepped out of the boarding craft with 40 soldiers behind him. The swarm warriors were already waiting, hundreds of them. They were tall creatures, covered in hard shells, with claws that could cut through metal. They moved in perfect coordination, controlled by the hive mind that connected them all. Ven expected the Terrans to set up defensive positions, to try to hold their ground, to die slowly, fighting to the last. Instead, Sergeant Park Ho gave a single-hand signal, and then the Terrans attacked. They moved through the swarm like fire through dry grass. Sergeant Park Ho was at the front, a weapon in each hand, firing so fast that the shots blurred together into a single stream of destruction. Swarm warriors fell by the dozen. When his weapons ran empty, he did not stop to reload. He simply dropped them and kept fighting with his bare hands. Ven watched the massive human grab a swarm warrior by the throat and lift it off the ground. The swarm creature was twice his size. It should have torn him apart. Instead, Park Ho crushed its neck with one hand and threw the body into a group of attackers behind him. The other Terran soldiers fought with the same terrifying efficiency. They never stopped moving. They never showed fear. When one of them was injured, they simply kept fighting. Ven saw a female soldier take a claw strike that would have killed any Velori instantly. She looked down at the wound in her side, grunted once, and then shot the creature that had hurt her before continuing forward. In 11 minutes, the Terrans took control of the hive ship. 800 swarm warriors died. The Terrans lost 3 soldiers. Later, Dr. Lee Su would explain what Ven had witnessed. She spoke calmly, scientifically, as if she was describing the weather rather than wholesale slaughter. "Our bodies are different from yours," she said. "Our planet has higher gravity. Our bones are denser, harder. What would shatter your skeleton barely scratches ours. Our blood carries more oxygen. We can fight for hours without rest. And when we are hurt, we heal faster than you can imagine." Ven remembered the soldier who had been clawed. She was already walking around the ship, helping to secure prisoners, acting as if she had never been injured at all. "But the most important difference," Dr. Lee Su continued, "is our history. For thousands of years, humans have been fighting, not against alien species, against each other. We developed weapons of terrible power just to use on our own kind. We learned tactics that most species would consider insane. We became very good at war because war was all we knew." She paused and looked out the window at the remains of the swarm fleet, which was now fleeing toward deep space. "The swarm has never fought a species like us before. They have only known prey, creatures that run, creatures that hide, creatures that beg for mercy." Her eyes were cold. "We do not run, we do not hide, and we do not beg." Captain Yun-Ti held a meeting with the Velori leaders that evening. The mood should have been celebration. The swarm had been defeated. For the first time in living memory, the enemy had been pushed back. But the Velori were not celebrating. They were too shocked, too terrified. They had just seen what humans could do when they were angry. Elder Rin spoke carefully. "Captain, I must ask, the swarm has threatened our people for thousands of years. We have always seen them as unstoppable, an endless nightmare, but your people destroyed them so easily. How is this possible?" Captain Yun-Ti was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "Elder, the universe is full of species that evolved in safety. Planets where food was easy to find. Worlds where the climate was gentle. Species that never needed to fight to survive." He looked at the Velori leader with something that might have been pity. "Our world was not like that. Everything on Earth wanted to kill us. Disease, weather, predators, each other. We survived because we learned to be the most dangerous thing in any room we entered. We learned that peace is not given. It is taken. It is earned with blood." He stood and walked to the window. Outside, his fleet hung in the sky like a wall of iron. The swarm is not unstoppable. They have simply never met anything that could stop them. Until now. Elder Rin felt a strange mix of emotions. Hope, gratitude, and deep beneath it all, a small, cold fear. The humans had saved his people. They had driven back the nightmare that had haunted the Velori for generations. But as Rin looked at Captain Yunti's calm face and cold eyes, he wondered if the Velori had simply traded one monster for another. For 4,000 years, the Velori had been running. They had retreated from world to world, always moving backward, always losing ground. They had built their entire culture around survival, around hiding, around praying that the swarm would not find them. Captain Yunti changed everything with a single word. Attack! The Velori Council sat in stunned silence. Elder Rin was the first to find his voice. Captain, I do not understand. We have just survived a massive assault. Our people are exhausted. Our resources are low. Surely we should use this time to rebuild, to strengthen our defenses, to prepare for the next attack. Captain Yunti shook his head slowly. With respect, Elder, that strategy has not worked for 4,000 years. It will not start working now. He walked to the center of the council chamber, where a holographic map of the galaxy flickered with light. Red dots marked swarm territory. They covered nearly a quarter of the known galaxy. Blue dots marked Velori space. There were barely a handful left. The swarm does not stop, the captain said. They do not rest. They do not negotiate. Every day you spend rebuilding, they are breeding more soldiers. Every defensive wall you build, they are planning how to break it down. You cannot win a war by hiding. You can only delay your defeat. Lieutenant Hana Kim stepped forward. She moved her hand across the holographic map and new images appeared. Swarm fleet movements, resource locations, weaknesses in their supply lines. We have studied your enemy, she said. They are numerous but predictable. Their hive mind makes them coordinated but inflexible. They do not adapt well to surprise. They do not know how to handle an enemy that attacks instead of defends. She pointed to a cluster of red dots near the edge of swarm territory. These are their breeding worlds, where they create new soldiers. Destroy these and their numbers will drop. Push deep enough and they will have to pull their fleets back to protect their core systems. For the first time in your history, you will have room to breathe. The Velori Council members looked at each other. The idea of attacking the swarm seemed insane. It went against everything they had been taught, everything they believed. But then Keeper Oli spoke up. For 4,000 years, we have done things the old way, and for 4,000 years we have lost. Perhaps it is time to try something new. Elder Rin looked at the young keeper. Then he looked at Captain Yunti. Then he looked at the map, at all those red dots that represented death and suffering and endless fear. Very well, he said finally. We will follow your lead, Captain. Teach us how to fight. And so the hunt began. The Terran fleet pushed into swarm territory with the Velori following close behind. At first, the Velori ship stayed back, watching, learning. They saw how the humans fought without fear, how they used speed and surprise instead of numbers and strength, how they turned every battle into a trap that the swarm walked right into. Lieutenant Hana Kim was the architect of destruction. She sat in her command chair on the flagship, watching screens that showed enemy movements across 100 light-years of space. She predicted where the swarm would send their fleets before they even knew themselves. She set ambushes that destroyed entire battle groups. She found weaknesses in defenses that had stood for centuries. Sergeant Park Ho led the ground assault. His soldiers moved from planet to planet, liberating Velori colonies that had been under swarm control for generations. The people they rescued had never seen aliens before. They had given up hope long ago. When they saw the Terran soldiers fighting through swarm armies to reach them, many of them fell to their knees and wept. Park Ho himself said very little. He was not a man of words, But his soldiers loved him because he was always at the front. He never asked them to do anything he would not do himself. And he never, ever left anyone behind. Keeper Oles had been assigned to document the war. He traveled with the fleet, recording everything he saw. He filled thousands of pages with observations about human behavior, things that seemed strange to him, things that terrified him, things that made him wonder what kind of universe could create such creatures. He noted that humans laughed before battle. They told jokes. They slapped each other on the back and smiled. It was as if they were going to a celebration instead of a fight where they might die. He noted that they sang songs while their ships burned around them. Old songs, in languages Oles did not understand. Songs about home and love and friends lost long ago. They sang as they died, and somehow that made their deaths feel less like defeats. He noted that Captain Yunti spent the night before the largest battle in Velori history sitting alone in his quarters, playing an ancient string instrument. The music was soft and sad. When Oles asked him what he was playing, the captain said it was a song from his homeland, a song about mountains and rivers and the ghosts of ancestors. "Are you afraid?" Oles asked. Captain Yunti considered the question for a long moment. "I am always afraid," he said finally. "Fear is what keeps me sharp. Fear is what keeps my people alive. A soldier who does not fear death is a fool, but a soldier who lets fear control them is already dead." "Then how do you fight?" Oles asked. "How do you walk into battle knowing you might not return?" The captain smiled. It was a sad smile, full of old pain and older wisdom. "Every human dies, Keeper. We have known this since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. What matters is not how long we live. What matters is what we protect before we go." The next day, the Terran fleet attacked the swarm's primary breeding world. It was the most heavily defended location in enemy territory. The swarm had gathered over 1,000 ships to protect it. The battle lasted for 3 days. On the third day, the swarm retreated. It was the first time in recorded history that the swarm had ever pulled back from a position they wanted to hold. Their hive mind could not process what was happening. They had always been the hunters. They had always been the ones who chased and killed and consumed. Now, for the first time, they were the prey. News of the victory spread across the galaxy. Species that had been hiding for centuries began to emerge from their shelters. Civilizations that had given up hope started to believe again. The Terrans had done what no one else could do. They had made the swarm afraid. Dr. Li Su spent most of her time during the campaign working with Velori scientists. She shared human medical knowledge freely. She taught them how to heal wounds that they had always thought were fatal. She showed them technologies that could grow food in places where nothing had grown for generations. One day, a Velori scientist asked her why the humans were helping so much, why they were giving away secrets that could have made them powerful. Dr. Li Su looked confused by the question. "Why would we keep secrets from allies?" she asked. "We came here to help you. Helping you means making you stronger. What good would it do to save your people from the swarm only to leave you weak and dependent on us?" The scientist had no answer. In all his life, he had never met a species that thought this way. Every civilization he knew hoarded power jealously. Every species looked out for themselves first. But the Terrans were different. They had come across the galaxy to answer a call from strangers. They were dying in battles that had nothing to do with their own world, and now they were sharing knowledge that had taken them centuries to develop. As the campaign continued, Oles began to understand something important. The humans were not just powerful. They were not just fierce warriors and clever tacticians. They were something else entirely. They were protectors. For all their violence, for all their frightening capacity for destruction, the humans had one trait that set them apart from every other species Oles had ever studied. They cared. They genuinely, deeply cared about people they had never met, people who looked different from them, people who came from worlds thousands of light years away. The humans treated every life as valuable, every person as worth saving. And that, Oles realized, was the most terrifying thing about them. Because if the humans ever decided that something was worth protecting, nothing in the universe could stop them. The final battle took place above the swarm's core world. It was a planet unlike anything the Velori had ever seen, completely covered in organic matter, pulsing with strange lights. The entire surface was alive, a single vast organism that had been growing for millions of years. Deep beneath its surface lived the Queen, the ancient intelligence that controlled every swarm creature in the galaxy. The combined Terran and Velori fleets surrounded the planet. 300 warships formed a ring of fire in the darkness. There was nowhere left for the swarm to run. This was their final stronghold, their last hope. Scout Ven stood on the observation deck of the Terran flagship. He had been given special permission to witness the end of the war. After all the battles he had recorded, all the horrors he had seen, he wanted to be there when it was finally over. Captain Yun-Ti stood beside him, staring at the planet below. His face showed no emotion. He had been fighting for nearly a year now. He had lost soldiers. He had made difficult decisions, but he had never wavered, never hesitated. "It is strange," Ven said quietly. "For 4,000 years this is all we wanted, to see the swarm defeated, to know that our children could live without fear. Now that it is happening, I do not know how to feel." Captain Yun-Ti nodded slowly. "Victory is never as clean as we hope it will be. There is always loss, always grief. The war ends, but the memories do not." Before Ven could respond, a signal came through the communication system. It was not from the fleet. It was not from any source they recognized. It was coming from the planet itself. The Queen was speaking. Her voice filled every ship in the fleet. It was cold and alien, like the sound of ice cracking in deep water. But there was something else in it too, something that sounded almost like fear. "Terrans, I demand an explanation. What are you?" Captain Yun-Ti walked to the communication panel. His voice was calm when he responded. "We are humans. We come from a small planet called Earth. You probably do not remember us. Your scouts passed through our system many thousands of years ago and decided we were not worth noticing." There was a long pause. Then the Queen spoke again. "Our archives show your species. You were primitives, pre-spaceflight, barely intelligent. You should not exist at this level of development. The mathematics do not support such rapid advancement." Lieutenant Hana Kim stepped forward. "Your mathematics are wrong. You calculated how long it would take a peaceful species to develop. You did not account for war. You did not account for competition. You did not account for the fact that we spent every moment of our existence fighting to survive." Captain Yun-Ti continued. 4,000 years ago you dismissed us. You quarantined our system. You put up a beacon telling the galaxy that we were harmless and could be ignored. Then you forgot about us. You left us alone in the dark." His voice hardened. "The dark is where we learn to see." The Queen was silent for a very long time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The cold arrogance was gone. In its place was something the Velori had never heard from the swarm before: uncertainty. "What do you want, Terrans? Do you seek our destruction? Do you wish to consume us as we have consumed others?" Captain Yun-Ti looked at Dr. Li Su. She stepped forward and spoke into the communication system. "We are not like you," she said. "We do not consume. We do not destroy unless we must. We came here to end a war, not to commit genocide. But that choice is yours, not ours." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Surrender. Withdraw your forces from all occupied territories. Release the species you have enslaved. Return to your world and stay there. If you do this, we will let you live. We will let your species continue. But if you refuse, if you attack us or any other species ever again, we will return. And we will not be merciful a second time." The Queen's response was immediate. "You would spare us, after everything we have done, after all the worlds we have destroyed. Why?" Dr. Lee Su smiled sadly. "Because we have been where you are. We have been the monsters. We have destroyed and consumed and spread across our world like a plague. We learned, eventually, that this path leads only to emptiness. We learned that building is better than destroying, that protecting is better than conquering. We learned that the measure of a species is not what they can kill but what they can save." There was another long pause. Then slowly the swarm fleet began to move, not toward the Terran ships, away from them. Thousands of vessels turned and flew back toward the planet. The weapons on the surface powered down. The organic growths that had covered the world began to retract, pulling back like a creature curling into itself. The war was over. 3 months later, Elder Rin stood before a gathering of species from across the galaxy. They had come from dozens of worlds, species that had been hiding for centuries, species that had given up hope long ago, species that had watched the war against the swarm and could not believe what they were seeing. Captain Yun Ti stood beside the elder. He looked uncomfortable in his formal uniform. He had never enjoyed ceremonies. He preferred the quiet of his quarters, the soft sound of his ancient instrument, the company of his soldiers. But this was important. This was what the war had been for. "For 4,000 years, Elder Rin said, his voice carrying across the great hall, my people cried out for help. We sent our signal into the void, begging for anyone to answer. The universe was silent. We began to believe that we were alone, that no one was listening, that no one cared." He looked at the human captain. "We were wrong," one species answered. "They crossed the galaxy to help strangers they had never met. They fought a war that was not their war. They died so that others might live. They taught us something important." Rin paused, gathering his thoughts. "They taught us that silence is not emptiness. Sometimes silence means something is listening, waiting, growing. The humans were in the dark for 4,000 years, and in that darkness they became something extraordinary. Not monsters, not conquerors, protectors, guardians. A species that would travel across the stars not for power or resources or territory, but simply because someone needed help." He turned to face the assembly. "Let this day mark the beginning of something new. Not an empire built on fear, but an alliance built on trust. Not a galaxy where the strong consume the weak, but a community where every species looks out for every other. The humans have shown us the way. It is up to us to follow." Captain Yun Ti was asked to speak. He stood at the podium for a long moment, looking out at the hundreds of alien faces staring back at him. "I am not good with words," he said finally. "I am a soldier. I know how to fight. I know how to lead. But I am not a politician or a philosopher. I cannot tell you what the future holds or what we should build together." He paused. "What I can tell you is this. Humans have spent our entire existence looking up at the stars, wondering if we were alone. We dreamed of finding other life. We dreamed of making friends among the distant lights in our sky. When we finally left our world and found that the galaxy was full of suffering and fear, we had a choice. We could have conquered. We could have consumed. We could have become another swarm, spreading across the stars and taking what we wanted." He shook his head. "Instead, we chose to help. We chose to protect. We chose to be the answer to the calls for help that echoed through the darkness. That is who we are. That is who we will always be." He stepped back from the podium. The hall was silent for a moment. Then the applause began. It started slowly, with a few individuals clapping their hands or striking their limbs together or making whatever gesture their species used to show approval. Then it spread, growing louder and louder until the entire hall shook with the sound. Scout Ven stood at the back of the room, watching. He thought about everything he had seen over the past year. The battles, the victories, the losses, the strange, terrifying, wonderful creatures called humans who had changed everything. He thought about the broadcast towers on Sanctuary Prime, still sending their signal into the void even though no one was listening anymore. Perhaps, he thought, they should keep the towers running. Perhaps there were other species out there, crying out for help, waiting for someone to answer. And now, thanks to the humans, there was someone who would. The ceremony ended. The crowds began to disperse. Captain Yun Ti made his way through the throng of well-wishers toward the exit. He found Elder Rin waiting for him. "What will you do now, Captain?" Rin asked. "The war is over, your mission is complete." Yun Ti looked up at the stars visible through the great windows of the hall. "There are always more missions, Elder, more calls for help, more darkness that needs light." He smiled just slightly. "We have 4,000 years of silence to make up for. I suspect we will be busy for a very long time." Elder Rin watched the human captain walk away. Behind him, the first notes of the Velori anthem began to play, the same melody that had accompanied their desperate broadcasts for 4,000 years. But now, something new had been added. Human voices, singing in harmony with the ancient song. The silence was finally over, and the galaxy would never be the same.